Hello, listeners, and welcome to this episode of Scoliosis Dialogues. We have the honor of speaking with the Best Poster Award winners from the SRS 2021 annual meeting. My name is Cynthia Nguyen, and I'm from the Shriners Hospital in Pasadena. I have the honor of interviewing Dr. Wanis Nafo from the University of Hong Kong, who received the John H. Moe Best Basic Research Poster Award, which is named after John Moe, the first SRS president. It's quite an honor, and I'm so glad, Dr. Nafo, that you were able to join us today.
Oh, thank you, Cynthia. Really appreciate it.
Well, we would love to hear about your professional journey. It's crossed multiple continents.
It is, and it's quite interesting for me as well, because my career kicked off back in 2010 when I finished my undergrad in civil engineering with two majors. One is in structural engineering and the other one is transportation. After graduation, I worked in a structural engineering sector. There, I was introduced to using finite element toolkit to solve some structural analysis and design problems. In 2013, I relocated to Canada, where I was supposed to do my graduate studies, master's and PhD. Little did I know, my career is going to change drastically. I was introduced to the field of biomechanics. I did my master's and PhD there. 7 years later, with 3 degrees and advanced research training, as well as training in CT technology, I found myself relocating again to Hong Kong to work in orthopedics and traumatology department at the University of Hong Kong. Currently, I do my best to develop implants that basically help AIS patients to have a better quality of life.
Oh, very cool. What made you choose orthopedic spine research specifically?
It's a good question. Several reasons, because working in this area is rewarding in different levels. Perhaps the most important one is the moral one. The fact that you know your work is going to provide some solutions to people who have spinal deformities is very satisfactory. And also there's a scientific dimension. This area is very thirsty for innovative ideas. So anything you can come up with, as long as you validate it, you know it's going to be used in this field. And there is also the financial aspect of it. Out of all the regions that we go to see doctors, I think spinal problems comes in the fifth or sixth in order. So there is a job security in that area. So that's why I chose it.
What in particular drew you to Dr. Chung's lab enough for you to cross the whole ocean to work there?
His research methods, literally that's what he does is basically when there is a problem, he tries to approach it from different angles. So if you look at his teams, I'm a mechanical engineer. There's another one who's electrical engineer. There's another one who's software engineer. That's beside the clinicians he has in his team. So the way he approaches solutions or try to figure out solutions to certain problems is multidimensional. Working in such a group it's very, very rewarding. And of course, I will obtain a lot of skills out of it, hopefully.
That's so great. Cool. Vertebral body tethering is a very hot topic in the spine surgery world. So we're so grateful that really awesome multidisciplinary groups like yours are working on making VBT as good as it can be. Why don't you summarize for our listeners kind of the main points of your award-winning study?
I'll be happy to. Yes, as you mentioned, vertebral body tethering is a very hot topic and new technology. But the problem, at least what has been reported in the literature, the failure rate is relatively high. It's about 47% or 50%. So we wanted to know what could cause this high rate of failure. At the very beginning, that there was that notion that tension applied on the material of the tether or the tether itself is what is causing the breakage. But what we found out, the material is very strong, very, very strong. So the tension itself might not be the reason. So we started looking into other reasons. And one of the things that caught our attention is the design of the screw heads. So what we found out at the contact between the tether body and the screw heads, there are sharp edges, so typically like a knife. So there are some sort of stress concentrations at the contact between the two. And we found out basically these stresses correlate to the amount of malalignment that might happen during the surgery. So the higher the malalignment, the higher the stresses. Afterwards, we wanted to know, okay, we know there are stresses. Now, can we predict when the failure is going to happen? In this sense, we use the fatigue properties of the material that is used to make the tethers. And we were able to estimate based on the time or durability to what extent we can allow metal alignment. So far, we are recommended to stay in the vicinity of 1 mm. Very hard task, but that's our recommendations for now.
So your team identified a problem, and what made you choose to use a computer simulation, a finite element analysis, instead of, let's say, like a different kind of model?
The simple answer to this question is because it's faster and easier. And also in HKU, we have a supercomputer, so this seemed to be a viable option. What we did is basically used Abacus. It's a well-known finite element solver. So the boundary conditions of the model that we created was defined based on a commercial tool that we use in our surgeries. And also when defining the boundary conditions, for example, the metal alignment of the screw head, for that one, I had to go to the operation theaters in Queen Mary Hospital associated with HKU, as well as relying on our database. The co-authors of the abstract are actually spine surgeons. All of them operate in vertebral body tethering. So we're kind of a complementary team to work on this problem. And also what helped us is we have our center here for AIS is one of the best in Asia Pacific region. So we had a wealth of data that we can rely on to carry on the study.
Makes sense.
I hope this answers the question.
Yes, it definitely did. And then what are the next steps for your work with VBTs?
Currently, we're trying to, what we noticed in our research, the loss of correction that is associated with vertebral body tethering might not happen only because of the tether breakage. There are other reasons associated with the tensioning methods, the severity of the spine deformity. Currently, we're working on it. I cannot disclose all the details, but stay tuned until the next meeting. We promise you, we're going to surprise you.
Very awesome. In addition to your projects on vertebral body tethering, what other research projects do you have ongoing?
My focus in general is basically developing implants, or at least trying to improve the mechanism of the, I wouldn't say the current ones, but certain current technologies in general. So what we're trying to do for now is basically creating our own models for spine, deformed spines. So basically numerical models and 3D printing, and to try to investigate the mechanism or the causes of this mechanical causes of scoliosis, as well as the causes of scoliosis progression. Again, I have to apologize. I cannot disclose much about this, but stay tuned. We're going to surprise you soon.
No worries. We look forward to seeing what other awesome work comes from you and your lab in the future at future meetings and in our spine journals.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for your time today. Congratulations again on the award. And we'll probably be interviewing you again around this time next year when you win more awards.
Hopefully. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Jaysson Brooks, and I am so honored to be with Dr. Caglar Yilgor, who was fortunate to be the poster award winner at this past SRS meeting in St. Louis. Thank you so much for being on this podcast, Caglar.
Thank you, Jaysson, for having me. It's a great honor. Thank you.
Awesome. So first, I think a lot of people obviously will see you up on the podium, but not really kind of get to know the man behind the project. So I'm curious, tell me a little bit more, where were you born? And did you have any other doctors in your family that kind of encouraged you to become a doctor, or were you the first in your family?
So actually, I was born in Mersin. So this is a port city in southern Turkey, right on the Mediterranean coast. And as you just indicated, my father is actually a professor of pediatrics. So he is still in active work life, and he is a physician and an administrator at the hospital. He is still working in our hometown. My mother is a journalist, but she didn't later on pursue her career. And now she is like a grandmother as a profession. And actually, like when I was growing, I had multiple aunts and uncles from both my father's and mother's sides. And I was, born and raised into a big family with cousins, and almost all of them had like a university degree, active work life. And during my childhood, actually, my father's day-to-day work was so busy that in many days he would go to work before we woke up, and he would come back after we already were in bed. So, but later on, I think he found a workaround. He had this like a convertible wardrobe at home that would turn into a tiny one-bed clinic in the house. So this way he came home earlier, and we were able to spend more time together. But I believe this move he made, I think, has resulted in my very early exposure to the, like the world of patients and medicine. And I think I was, getting so used to all my, relatives, working day and night, Saturdays. It was during my high school years that I already got my email address that would go with like my name and then @doctor.com. So
you were already destined. That's pretty funny. A lot of people from the US, it's very standard. We have, we're in high school for 4 years, medical school, high school for 4 years, college for 4 years, medical school for 4 years, residency when it comes to orthopedics for 5 years, and if it's neurosurgery, 6 to 7 years. What is the pathway in Turkey, or just in general, what is the pathway with regards to the number of years that it took to go, I guess, from high school up to where you are now?
So I think it's pretty much the same. So after high school, when we go to the medical school, it's 6 years. But the first 4 years are more, 3 to 4 years is more theoretic, and last 3 years and two years are more hands-on. And then if we go to orthopedics, it's 5 years. If you go to neurosurgery, it's 6 more years. And then we also have the chances to go for the fellowships as well as in the US. Great.
And all your training was done in Turkey?
Yeah, so I was trained actually not in my hometown, but in Ankara, in capital city of Turkey, in Hacettepe University. So it's a university with a very long history, and it's known for their high standards in research and patient care. And actually, in particular, the Department of Orthopedics and Traumatology, where I was trained, is like they have an outstanding track record, and they have a high ranking over other universities in Turkey, and also among other, around the globe.
That's excellent. That's excellent. So when it came to your journey to becoming a spine surgeon, who would you say have been your main mentors?
So I guess, like by default within the family, as I was discussing, I think my father and my sister were like my two main mentors initially with the careers they pursue. And my sister today, now she's also an academician pursuing research in biomaterials, tissue engineering, and 3D bioprinting. And so I always, grew looking at them. But then later on, I think, when I was a resident, actually, I did my thesis with Muharrem Yazıcı. When we were first matched, actually, I was willing to work on pediatric hips, but he somewhat insisted that my thesis should be on growing spines.
I wonder why.
And together, so we operated on piglets, looking for intermediate and adjacent segment problems after growing rod constructs. So this is, I believe, how I was introduced to the spine world. And after my residency, so in Turkey, we have this thing called the obligatory civil service. So I served there, and then I did my spine fellowship with Ahmet Alanay in Acıbadem University School of Medicine, where I'm still, practicing today. And after my fellowship, Ahmet and I, who has been and still is, I think, my mentor, we work in a senior junior joint practice. And Ahmet is such a critical thinker and he's so passionate about research and education that I think not a day passes that I do not learn something new from him.
Excellent. So before we jump into your study, I have one more question. Do you think you found a better work-life balance setup than your dad did, or are you still leaving before your kids wake up and coming back, when they, fall asleep?
Yeah, I think, I'm slightly better, but not as much as I want to be. So I generally end up seeing, maybe 2 to 3 weekdays. When I go home, she's still, awake. In the other 2 to 3 days, she's already, sleeping. And on Saturdays, we have almost half day work as well. So we have the Sundays as our father-daughter day, but yeah, I think I'm slightly better than my father, but not as much as I wanted to be.
I hear you. I mean, more on a personal front. I've actually tried to at least once a month actually put on my calendar like I would kind of any event. All right, this is going to be daddy-daughter date night, or this is going to be daddy-son date night, because I have a son too. And, of course, the dates might look different in terms of what we do. But for me, if it's on my calendar, it's going to actually happen. Versus if I just kind of, throw it out there. But we are the Scoliosis Research Society. And so we definitely want to make sure we talk about research. And you and your partners won an award on your study titled, "Is Thoracoscopic Vertebral Body Tethering a Pulmonary Function Declining or Improving Surgery?" Just to summarize for some folks who haven't heard your study or that didn't see the poster, but essentially you all had about 54 patients who had AIS. And what you did is you were actually collecting the pulmonary function test preoperatively, as well as 1 year, 2 years, and at latest follow-up, which is, I think, amazing. I think a lot of people just jump into the procedure, just starting to do the procedure without kind of setting up that framework of collecting all the data points that you really need to. And so it's really awesome that you guys were collecting PFTs from the beginning. And then you basically evaluated what the pulmonary function tests were after they had a thoracoscopic VBT procedure. And including, you didn't just evaluate what it was like in patients who had just a thoracic tether, but also patients who had thoracolumbar and lumbar tethers. And so that's kind of basically the setup. What did you find when you looked at the pulmonary function tests in these 54 patients who had these 3 different types of curves?
Thank you for the great introduction to the study. So I think, just a little bit of, background on the setup you are talking about is that, as I mentioned, in Hacettepe University, we really had this research-oriented background. And Ahmet is also a founding member of the European Stent Study Group. So we have in our team, all the members are, so used to having this data collection and critical analysis in all the other subjects as well. So since day one, as you said, we kept our, demographics and complications, clinics, radiographic, pulmonary, since we started VBT in 2014. And the thing was, when we did our first case, actually, as an early career spine surgeon myself, I was trained in a world where everything is already switched to all posterior. But Ahmet has experience in both anterior and posterior approaches. So in the beginning, we had this, concern. As you know, from the literature, we know that, the decline in pulmonary function was one of the main reasons why the transition to all posterior happened. So initially, we discussed first with our thoracic surgeon fellows, colleagues, and, we read the literature slightly on their, results. And we, the thing was, in their literature, it was very clear that, there was less pulmonary compromise if the approach was thoracoscopic. So, and actually, more recently, they are discussing whether we should do, 2 portals or 1 portal, 3 portals. So they are now discussing on the number of the portals. So this is how we choose in the beginning to go all thoracoscopic approach. But for the lumbar area, we go for a retroperitoneal flank incision for the thoracolumbar and double curve cases. So this patient group that you talk about, the 54 first consecutive patients, actually they were a group of growing patients. They grew 7 centimeters on average, and 90% of them at the latest follow-up of 31 months, so like 2.5 years, they reached actually skeletal maturity, looking at their hand X-rays. And they started off with a curve that was a mean of 48 degrees. It corrected to 25 in the first direct, and growth modulation during the follow-up led to 16 degrees at the latest follow-up. And actually, when talking about the pulmonary functions, the first thing we did was to look at the complications, and there were 11% of pulmonary complications actually, which was like, ipsilateral and contralateral atelectasis, total lobar atelectasis, pleural effusions, chylothorax. And, despite all these complications, I think the results of our study was really encouraging, because so out of the 54, 39 had thoracic only VBT. And in these particular cases, we have seen an improved pulmonary function test results significantly at 1 year, which was then also preserved until 2 years. And on the other hand, we had 6 patients with thoracolumbar and 9 patients with double curves. So where, we had both lungs in a thoracoscopic approach. So looking at these, like the numerical results of the percentage of PFTs, we still saw a slight increase, but actually, I think because of the paucity of numbers, maybe the p-values were not significant. So in these 2 groups of the thoracolumbar and double curve VBTs, we concluded that, it's not worsening. So, and all in all, I think like in the whole 3 groups of the thoracic, thoracolumbar and double curves, our final result is that like thoracoscopic VBT does not have, detrimental effects on pulmonary functions. So I think, like we hypothesized that compared to the previous literature on, when we did open anterior fusions and thoracoscopic anterior fusions, and we have observed, a decline in the pulmonary functions. Probably that decline back then was due to the approach, yes, and also, but there was a combined effect because of the fusion. So since VBT is non-fusion, probably we have like a better, chest dynamics. And we believe that this might be the underlying reason why this current particular study, the results are different from the literature on anterior fusion.
Now, I noticed that, yes, you said for thoracic VBTs that you actually saw an improvement in pulmonary function from pre-op to post-op. But when it came to the thoracolumbar curves, as well as the double curves, you didn't see any difference. Do you think that difference was just because you guys were underpowered, or do you think that it just doesn't affect it at all because you're just not working in that area?
Well, I guess, it's probably, I think, underpowered because, in the thoracolumbar group, so one lung is deflated. It's generally, the opposite lung compared to the thoracic only. For the thoracic, it's the right, and this one is the left. But it was only 6 patients. Yeah. And in the other group, where both lungs were deflated, it's only 9 patients. So I guess we were slightly underpowered. So looking at the numbers, it was like 2 or 3% of increases, both in both groups. But I think, we will have to see like what happens in 2 years, what happens in 5 years also, yeah, and have more number of patients in these groups to really conclude whether we have some improvement effect. But at least I think we can say that it's not declining even in those groups.
Interestingly, I was actually just recently reading a paper. It's an old paper by Dan Sakato and some of my partners here at Scottish Rite, where they were looking at whether a prone thoracoscopic anterior releases combined with posterior fusions, does that affect pulmonary function tests? And interestingly, they found that if you fused the spine posteriorly and did a thoracoscopic anterior release, you actually saw improvement in overall PFTs at latest follow-up. But if you did any sort of thoracoplasty in order to decrease the rib hump, that significantly decreased the PFTs. And so it was that part that really affected the PFTs and not really the thoracoscopic anterior release at all. And I know that a release is different than a tether, but still, you know, and that paper is from 2009. So I think it shows that if you're not really fusing the anterior spine, that it hopefully shouldn't result in any long-term detriments. I did want to ask you about the complications before we close, right? For someone like me who was really trained all posterior, you know, I'm pretty sure I could do the tether as a technique, but when it comes to the complications, that's the part where you're just not used to dealing with, you know, with a pleural effusion or a chital thorax or things like that. And so when you first had these complications, how did you address it? Like, did you have to very heavily lean on your mentors who had seen it before because they were doing kind of anterior fusions, or did some of this happen to your own patients? You kind of had to figure it out as you went along.
So actually, you know, I think this is like a forward thinking of Ahmet's is that, you know, since the first case, what we are doing was whenever it's in the thoracic cage, we have our surgery together with our thoracic surgeon. And whenever it's in the lumbar area, actually we have our access surgeon who is a cardiovascular surgeon. So, and they are also, you know, really trained in their areas. So our thoracic guys, they do like almost 2,000 cases every year themselves. Actually, our cardiovascular surgeon he used to be the president of the Minimal Invasive Cardiovascular Surgery Society of the world. So we are like, you know, really who are involved in this kind of surgery are like, you know, like Ahmet and these guys, our colleagues. So they are really well trained and they know what they are doing. So we really take our time with like meticulous dissection and everything. So, but still, you know, these kind of complications do happen. But I think, you know, when it comes to managing the complication, we rely on our, you know, thoracic surgery and vascular surgery colleagues. As you said, the technique is easy, but, you know, when you have the complications, you have to be ready to deal with them. It's really important when, you know, if someone else is willing to start this procedure.
Perfect. Well, everyone, there you have it. I know this past SRS meeting was very vertebral body tethering heavy, but at least this study that was done by Caglar and his colleagues show that while there may be many complications affecting the child's pulmonary function tests or overall function is not one of them. And so thank you for this amazing study. Thank you for your time. And we look forward to seeing what you and your group put out in the future.
Thank you. Thank you for the interview. This was, you know, really great to talk as both in the personal part and also in the study part. Thank you.
DePuy Synthes Spine, being a proud double diamond sponsor of the Scoliosis Research Society, would like to invite you to visit our professional education website at www.jnjinstitute.com and view the comprehensive surgical videos related to cervical and thoracolumbar deformity. For additional information, please contact your local sales representative.
The Scoliosis Research Society is a nonprofit professional organization made up of physicians and allied health personnel. Their primary focus is on providing continuing medical education for healthcare professionals and on funding and supporting research in spinal deformities. Please visit srs.org for further information.